American English, American English, American English webinar series. Teach and learn. American English webinar series.
Hello and welcome everyone to our final webinar of American English Webinar Series 2, brought to you by the American English team at the U.S. Department of State in Washington, D.C. Take a look at this great photo from Patricia León at Instituto Cultural Peruano Norteamericano, featuring teachers in the San Miguel branch in Lima, Peru. Thanks for sending that in. And everyone, please keep sharing your photos by emailing them to americanenglishwebinars@elprograms.org. We may feature them in our next webinar series that begins on May 4th. My name is Katie, part of the American English team, also known as Moderator Katie. And you'll see my friends, Moderator Heather and Moderator Amy, in the chat box to help you. Today is our final webinar in Series 2. Looking back at the titles, it's been a great set of topics, and I hope you all have learned a lot and had some time to reflect on how the webinar series might affect your teaching practice and professional development plans. Thanks so much for joining us during this series. As you know, our webinars are each 60 minutes long and related to a theme found on the American English website. The Teacher's Corner section from the website shown here features resources and lesson ideas related to the month's topic. The theme for March is Integrating Global Issues into Your English Class. You may notice the American English website has a new organization scheme. The Teacher's Corner can now be accessed in two ways, from the rotating feature at the top of the home page or through the English Teaching Resources section. By now, you're all pros at participating in the webinar, but just as a reminder, during the webinars, you will hear but not see the presenter, and you can participate through the chat box as you're doing now. You will also be answering some questions in the form of polls, and if you lose sound or have any trouble with your audio, you can follow along in the caption pod. Each webinar series consists of 6 webinars. During the series, webinars take place every other Wednesday. If you attend at least 4 out of 6 webinars, you will receive an e-certificate from the Regional English Language Officer or local U.S. Embassy after the series ends. It may take a few weeks, so please get in touch with your local point of contact with any questions about your e-certificate. And if you have additional questions, you can email americanenglishwebinars@elprograms.org. To make sure you're eligible, please submit your attendance at the very end of the webinar. We will give you a link to submit an online form at that time. We know that many of you are on the Ning, and we love to see your thoughts in the discussion. And we hope that if you haven't already joined, you will very soon. Here is where you can join this dynamic online community for English as a foreign language teachers. And you can find resources, discussions, recordings, presentations related to each webinar. And finally, we're very excited to announce our next webinar series, which begins on May 4th. The dates and titles for our next webinar series are here. We have a wide selection of topics ranging from using theater and music in the classroom to common challenges such as managing group work and increasing student talk time. Be sure to register through your RELO or local U.S. Embassy, and we hope to see you there for another great series. And now for today's webinar, Web 2.0 Tools, using free and open educational resources to impact learning locally and globally. Have you ever gotten lost trying to navigate the plethora of online education resources? Or conversely, are you having trouble knowing where to even begin? In this webinar, we will explore some of the most useful online resources for educators with a focus on open educational resources, or also known as OER. It's my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Melanie Brooks. Passionate about education, Melanie has trained pre-service and in-service EFL teachers across the globe. As a consultant, she has provided guidance to reform and restructure educational programs and policy at state and national levels. And as an expert in the tech field, she helps institutions of higher education hone their online approach and enhance the quality of their online and hybrid classes. Welcome, Melanie.
Hello, thank you for that introduction, Katie, and hello to everybody around the world. I'm so happy to be here today. I want to start by talking about the waiting room poll question I saw. It was pretty interesting because a lot of you knew that if something is licensed under the Creative Commons, the resource is free to use, but may have some restrictions on how it's used, modified, or shared. And really excitingly, a lot of people, 25%, had not heard of Creative Commons before. So I'm hoping that I can help you out today and teach you a little something. So I want to welcome you officially, everybody from around the globe who is participating in this webinar today, whether you are in your home, at your schools, or at your place of work, or together with a viewing group. I want to thank you for joining us today. My hope is that today I can introduce you to the Open Educational Resources movement, and I hope to show you some useful teaching and learning resources that you can use in your practice. Want to make sure everybody is able to hear me okay. If the volume is good for you, if you're being able to hear me, can you raise your hand by pressing the icon of the person at the top of your screen? Great. If you're having a hard time hearing me, go ahead and raise your hand. Let's see what that looks like. Okay. I'm going to try to speak a little louder and we'll go from there. Okay. So I want to share with you this quote that to me embodies the open educational resources movement. It says, "At the heart of the movement toward open educational resources is the simple and powerful idea that the world's knowledge is a public good and that technology in general, and the World Wide Web in particular, provide an extraordinary opportunity for everyone to share, use, and reuse knowledge." And with that, let's go to an overview of today's webinar. So first, I'm going to cover what are open educational resources, and then we'll talk about the global state of access to education. Next, we'll talk about OER, open educational resources, as a tool to equalize global educational access. After that, we'll give some examples of high-quality OER hopefully you can use. And finally, we'll end with next steps. So a lot of people wonder, what are open educational resources? So let's get started with a description and background about open educational resources, also known as OER. First, I'd like to ask you a question. You can respond by raising your hand in the raise your hand function, that little guy at the top of your screen. So the question is this: raise your hand. Do you ever wish you could make 1,000,000 copies of some resource for your students without worrying about copyright? If the answer is yes, raise your hand and let us know. Oh yeah, so it looks like a lot of you would like to do that. Luckily, I'm going to show you some ways that you can do that today. So let's start with the development of the OER, Open Educational Resources movement. The many contributions made to OER are really far too numerous for me to talk about here. However, I will discuss a few key moments and key players, starting with in 1973, a German professor kind of shifted the paradigm of education, our idea of education, by founding the Free International University. He was actually dismissed, fired from his teaching post for permitting 50 students who had been rejected from admission to study with him at no cost for free. This free university that he founded started really questioning the prohibitive nature of educational systems and encouraging reform to give more people access. Later in 2002, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, Open Courseware project began a global open educational resources movement after putting all of their entire course catalog and materials online for anyone to access. In that same year, at UNESCO's 2002 Forum on the Impact of Open Courseware for Higher Education in Developing Countries, the term open educational resources was first adopted. So they really coined that phrase there. And then most recently, in 2013, Tidewater Community College launched a program called the Z Degree. It was named Z Degree for zero textbook costs. So professors in the business administration program stopped using the expensive traditional textbooks, and instead they found, remixed, and adapted free openly licensed content for their course materials. Within months, professors reported that new openly licensed materials and teaching techniques had led to better student outcomes, engagement, and learning. Now, let's take a moment to see what you already know about open educational resources. So here's a poll question, and there's more than one right answer. The question is, which of the following are characteristics of open educational resources? And there are 4 choices there. I see a lot of people are choosing that they're free use for educational purposes. Great, a lot of people are saying that. Some people are saying includes all types of media. And some people are saying there's an open copyright. And oh, nobody got tricked. Nobody's choosing D. Good job. You guys are on the ball. Very nice. All right. Well, let's move on to our working definition. It already looks like you know something about OER, but we'll talk a little bit about what other people think it might be. So as I mentioned before, the term OER was first coined at UNESCO's 2002 Forum on Open Courseware. Because the idea of open educational resources is fairly new, we are still really deciding what the exact definition of it is. So those questions I asked you, there's not a clear answer to that. There are many institutions that have somewhat different definitions, and the tensions really exist around things like type of resource. So some definitions will limit OER to digital resources, while others consider that any educational resource, including paper-based, can be included in the definition. For our uses today, I will include any resource, music, paper, digital, or non. Another question is around purpose of the resource. While some of the definitions require a resource to be produced with an explicit educational aim in mind, others broaden this to include any resource which may potentially be used for learning. As a teacher, I know that we take a bunch of resources and we make them used for learning. So for our purposes today, we're going to be broad and we'll include any resource that could potentially be used for learning. And then there's a copyright. So most definitions require that the resource be placed either in the public domain or have a Creative Commons license. Others require for use to be granted merely for educational purposes or exclude commercial uses. The resources we talk about will either be in the public domain or under an open license of some kind. If you don't know what that means right now, don't worry, because we are going to talk about what an open license is. And maybe most importantly for all of us teachers, the resource by nature of being open must be free. Everybody does agree on that. So here's a definition that I think is very elegant. It's the one that's used by the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Teaching, learning, and research resources that reside in the public domain or have been released under an intellectual property license that permits their free use and repurposing by others. Open educational resources include full courses, course materials, modules, textbooks, streaming video, tests, software, and any other tools, materials, or techniques used to support access to knowledge. All right, next I would like to show you a short video about OER. Let's check that out.
For most of human history, education has been a walled garden, accessible only to the privileged few. In the 15th century, some people opposed the printing press, and in the 19th century, some academics fought against universal primary education. Today, the struggle to provide quality education continues. Open education resources are education materials that are free to use and can be adapted and customized. By providing universal access, OER are continuing the movement toward education for all. With OER, for the first time, it is actually possible to educate everyone. Take, for example, Femi. She's 17, lives in a large city in Nigeria, and once dreamed of becoming an engineer. But there are few university spots available, and her family cannot afford the fees. With some extra money set aside from work, Femi spends time at a local internet cafe. She logs on to MIT's website and starts taking chemical engineering courses. Starting with a few hours of internet each week, Femi works her way through video lectures, notes, and other learning materials. An electrical engineering degree from MIT costs nearly $200,000. But with OpenCourseWare and a lot of self-motivation, Femi is determined to learn. When Femi has questions about the materials, she logs onto Kuriki and finds thousands of additional videos and notes contributed by experts. Plus, since MIT uses an open license, lots of people have translated the material. Femi finds class notes in her local language, adapted with additional explanations. As the year progresses, Femi discovers others doing exactly what she's doing. She joins a study group at Peer-to-Peer University and builds a community of learners and friends from all over the world: China, Mexico, even others in Nigeria. Femi hopes to use what she's learned to get a better job. Perhaps someday she'll get school credit, maybe even a university degree. 10 years ago, Femi's story would have been impossible. But today, thanks to OER, we're building a more equitable and interconnected world.
Great. So hopefully that kind of helped you understand what OER is. So as mentioned there are a couple of different things, or actually a few different things that OER can be. As I mentioned before, they can include course materials, course modules, entire courses, videos, tests, software, online tools, materials, and techniques. All of these can be OER. So let's talk a little about copyright. There are various licenses that authors can use to designate the usage rights on their work, basically telling people how they can and cannot use that work. I'm going to give you a short introduction to the different designations or types of licenses under the open license. And I'm going to show you how you can understand these and then use these for your own works if you so desire. The Creative Commons is a nonprofit organization, and their free copyright licenses provide a simple, standardized way to give the public permission to share and use creative work. In addition, the Creative Commons organization has researched and integrated copyright laws from around the world so that the copyright designation applies in most countries. This is an example of a symbol you might find on a book, a textbook, or a PDF you find online that would designate that this material is licensed under the Creative Commons. Now, I'm curious to hear from you and learn about your experience. Using the raise your hand function again, can you raise your hand if you have ever seen one of these Creative Commons license icons on materials that you have used? All right, we have some people. Oh, we have a lot of people. Great. So you might be wondering whether or not you've seen this before. What does the by mean? What does the NC or the SA mean? I bet this is kind of confusing. So let's go over what each of these designations means. I won't spend a long time on each one, but I will give you a brief description of each so you can have an idea of what each one means when you see it or use it in the future. So the first one, the by, okay? When you see those letters or the symbol of the person, it means that you must attribute or give credit to the original creator of the resource. All right, so next we have the ND, no derivatives. Excuse me while I clear my throat just a moment. Sorry about that. No derivatives means that the work must be passed along unchanged and whole. You're not allowed to alter it. This is the most restrictive designation, and you won't see it a lot on OER materials. So the SA means share alike, and all new creations made with share alike, adaptations, remixing, or anything including the original creation, must have identical licensing. So if the original creator said that the work has to be non-commercial and you use it, your work has to also be non-commercial. Speaking of non-commercial, NC. NC means non-commercial. It means that if you're using that work, it cannot be used to make a profit, to make money. So lastly, we have the CCO, Creative Commons Zero. This is the very least restrictive license that the Creative Commons offers. When chosen, it means that the author who owns the work is dedicating the work to the public domain by waiving all of his or her rights to the work worldwide. That means that you can copy it, modify it, distribute it, and perform the work, even for commercial purposes, all without asking permission. The Creative Commons website has a kind of neat tool, and it's free, that you can use to copyright your own work under one of these licenses. Simply pick the options that you want, and it will generate words or an icon that you can print in your materials to show its copyright status. You see here, I selected the options that the adaptations could be made and could be shared, but only for non-commercial uses. So next, here's the icon and the text that the website generated for me. In the chat box, looking at this copyright symbol, can you type and tell me what the crossed out dollar symbol might mean? Note that there is an NC designation underneath it. Please type your answers in the chat box and let's see what you think. Great. I see some people are saying non-commercial, and that is right. So if you see this, it means that you can use the work, but you can't use it to make money off of it. So, and also if you want to contribute something, everybody else can use it, but they can't make money off of it. Beautiful. Now I can paste this icon or text into my original creation so that everybody knows how I want it to be used and shared. Now, when you see this on a textbook or materials you find online, you'll know exactly what it means. Let's move on and talk a little bit about the global state of education and how open educational resources might make access to education more equitable. Here you see the map that depicts or shows you the gross domestic product, GDP, of each country, divided by the number of people in the country. So the wealthier countries are darker, while the countries with fewer monetary resources are lighter in color. We'll come back and look at this in just a minute. Now we have something with this graphic. It's the world literacy rates. So purple corresponds to areas where the literacy rate is at or near 100%, very high, while the orange and red colors correspond to areas where the literacy rate is below 50%. Now let's look at these side by side. When we see them side by side, we can see that wealth seems to be correlated with literacy rates. Now, this makes logical sense, as countries with more resources to educate their students tend to have higher literacy rates. As a complex topic, there are many, many causes of this inequity that OER really can't address. However, one of them is clear. The cost for educational materials is prohibited for many governments, schools, and families. So believing that OERs can widen access to quality education, particularly when shared by many countries and higher education institutions, UNESCO has even championed OERs as a means of promoting educational access and equity. Let's talk about how. Though the issue of affording quality materials is more serious in less affluent countries, countries with less money, even countries with relatively well-off populations have problems with materials costs. In the US, the dominant publishing model is seeing textbook costs rise rapidly while quality suffers. According to a recent study, 65% of students did not buy a textbook because of the cost. That's a lot. It was too expensive. And 48% of students say that they altered or changed which classes they took based on which textbooks cost less money. Around the world, there are often shortages of high quality, affordable materials, and many students cannot access the existing materials due to cost barriers or copyright issues that prevent translation. There is less published research at the K through 12 level, but teachers I have worked with all over the world have often remarked on the scarcity of good and affordable educational resources. As an example, it's been found that the average yearly cost for textbooks to study a program in the biggest public university of Brazil, the Universidade de São Paulo, is 67% of the Brazilian minimum wage. Even though many students receive a small bolsa or scholarship to study, the cost of books alone makes it almost impossible for low-income families to afford to send a child to the university. Likewise, even in Argentina, where the minimum wage is relatively high, the cost of books would represent 46% of the total family income. The situation is similar or worse in many countries around the world. So I'm curious, let's take a look at a poll question and tell me which, if any, challenges you have faced with teaching materials available to you. This is multiple answer and no wrong answer. There are 5 different choices. Let's see what you guys are thinking. I see a lot of you are saying insufficient resources or too expensive, contextually or culturally limited, great, hard to distribute, and some other challenges too. Great, thanks. Thank you for weighing in there. Let's get back and take a look at our presentation. So as you can see, in the traditional model of materials publishing, textbooks and materials can be very costly. As a result, in some countries, 6 or more students may have to share one outdated textbook. And teachers face a shortage of workbooks, exercises, and other materials to support the lesson. Additionally, there are a shortage of materials targeted to diverse language and contextual needs. In order to maximize profits, publishers want to cater to as broad an audience as possible, and so materials are often not produced in languages of the country where they are being used. Additionally, the cultural perspective is often US or British-centric. In her TED Talk, titled The Danger of a Single Story, Nigerian author Chimamanda Adichie discusses how impressionable we all are in the face of a single story. Although she grew up in Nigeria, when she began writing at a very young age, her stories reflected the British and American books she had been exposed to about blue-eyed children who played in the snow ate apples, and wondered what the weather would be like each day. It was only later, with the discovery of other African writers, that she began to find her voice, writing about things she recognized rich cultural traditions relevant to her experience. So, as a result of limited resources, teachers often feel bound to rigid curricula that are not tailored to their students' linguistic, cultural, or contextual needs. Lastly, another problem with traditional materials is that they're hard to distribute to non-urban areas. The World Inequality Database on Education has published findings on the powerful influence of circumstances such as wealth, gender, ethnicity, and location, over which people have very little control, but which play an important role in shaping their opportunities for education. One repeated trend is that students in rural areas have less access to educational opportunities and materials than do their urban counterparts, than do students who are living in cities. In the OER model, there are many freely available materials, so we don't have to worry about cost. Educators can publish, often reuse, alter, and translate the materials, so they can translate them into their local language and adapt them to their contextual needs for free. The only cost incurred would be printing. So one example is in South Africa's Department of Basic Education, which printed 10 million openly licensed books from Siyavula Open Education. They paid only $2 per book. And lastly, there are multiple distribution channels. So most open resources can be distributed in print, through mobile devices, or online. So schools and parents without sophisticated technology or high-speed internet can still use them. I believe the adoption of open educational resources can begin to narrow the global educational gaps that we see far too often. Are you ready to see some resources that you can use in your classroom? First, let's take a poll. I'm curious, what do you think? How many, you can go ahead and vote. We're going to have a few choices here. How many K through 12 educators around the world are currently using open educational resources as their primary materials? So 2%, 7%, 10%, or 25%. What do you think? All right, so you guys are voting right now. And great, so not able to see your answers, but I'm guessing you guys are guessing 2% or 7%. All right, a lot of you are saying 25%. Good, all right. Well, the answer is actually 10%. So given that the OER movement is relatively new, in my opinion, 10% is not a bad number, though I'd love to see it go higher. Let's go on and talk about resources. So I'm curious to know about your experience. Can you use your chat box to tell me in a few words, what are the qualities that you look for when you are finding online materials to use in your classes? Yeah, so okay, what do you guys think? What do you look for? Some people told me before they need it to be free, easy access, good, clear, adaptable, culturally appropriate, easy to share. Lovely. A lot of good answers. Practical. Great. So in the book, Changing Digital Landscape of Education, Grianne Cannoli gives the following characteristics that she believes the best online resources should have or should embody. So the first one is about encouraging reflection. The resource should really allow and encourage the learner to reflect upon his or her learning or learning process. Secondly, rather than a one-dimensional worksheet or exercise, the resource should really engage students in a dialogue with each other or with their communities or their teachers about the learning that's taking place. And collaboration. The best resources encourage collaboration. That can be as simple as collaborating among students or as complex as a community or a worldwide collaboration, including institutions, governments, and community members. The resource should also apply our theory to practice. So it should apply what we know about education and learning theory, and that knowledge should be reflected in how the resource works. For instance, if we know that students learn best in an interactive environment rather than a teacher-centered learning environment, our resources should reflect that characteristic of interactivity and student-centeredness. It should create a community of peers. So the best resources create a community of people who are interested in and want to contribute to a community of learning. This can be a simple chat forum or learning groups that meet in person. Okay, they should enable creativity. We really want resources that don't have binary yes or no answers. We want our students to think creatively and critically. And lastly, really necessarily, they have to motivate the learner. They should be interesting to our students and motivate them to get involved, to learn. Following in the next few slides are what I consider to be high quality resources. I hope that they will be useful to you in your practice. Don't worry about writing them down, as we will have a resource page for you with all of that information. So you can just relax and watch and learn and interact. So earlier I talked about the high relative cost of textbooks to family income, which makes me want to ask you another question. Can you respond to this poll question? What it asks you is, how much do your students like buying textbooks? So A, they love it. B, they don't mind. C, they don't like it so much. Why are textbooks so expensive? And then D, most drafts are pink with purple spots. Okay, so I see a lot of you are saying they just like it. Some of you are saying they don't mind. Some are saying they love it. And a few of you said giraffes are pink with purple spots. Okay, I have to admit, D was a trick answer. I just wanted to see if you were still paying attention or if I had lost you. All right, let's get back to the presentation. So this discussion about textbooks reminds me of an experience that I recently had. So just last week in class, I asked my students to open their workbooks, and I found that most of my students didn't have the book we were supposed to work from. Has this ever happened to you? When I asked why, the students were a little shy, but finally someone told me the book costs $53. Now, some textbooks are amazing and worth the cost, but this workbook was actually not my favorite. It's a little old-fashioned, and it only has 132 pages. So $53 seemed like a lot of money to spend on a very average workbook. So I told my students not to buy the book, and I committed to putting together a course full of open educational resources for them, including a textbook. So I went online and I searched, and I found this textbook that you're looking at right here. This is the front page, called Communication Skills, on one of the websites that I'm about to show you. Luckily, there are a number of resources where you can download ready-made textbooks, adapt already existing textbooks and materials, or create your own. So let's go to the next slide and check out some of these resources. So the first one is the one that we just saw a resource from. It's called College Open Textbooks. They have free downloadable textbook like the one that you saw on the last slide. This website is actually not a repository of the textbooks, but instead more like a search engine that will take you to other sites that have the textbooks. So their listings point to textbooks in many different websites, on many different websites. And of course, they're all free. So the second resource that's going to be on your page that we're going to give you is Flat World Knowledge. It's very similar to College Open Textbooks, as it offers digital textbooks for teachers and for students. There are a lot of websites with open textbooks. These are just a couple of them. How about creating your own textbooks or creating your own materials? So next we have CK through 12. It's a learning platform that's to create textbooks based on the CK through 12's free resources. So you can create textbooks with video, audio, images, interactivity, And you can even track student progress and share lessons online. OER Commons, I love this website. It's a dynamic digital library and network of open educational resources. There are specific resources for EFL teachers. The OER Commons includes lots of other resources besides books. You can download a course, a unit, a class, an activity, and much more. In addition, you can use their really interesting tool called Open Author to create your own openly licensed educational resources, combining text, images, sound, videos, and supplemental resources. Remix and reshare with your colleagues and educators from around the world, really. Next, the Curricula Library, I think you might have remembered that from our video, hosts thousands of educator-vetted, openly licensed online educational materials that teachers, educators, or other professionals have created and have made freely available. You can use, reuse, adapt, and share. And you can also upload your own materials there. And lastly, OpenStax offers students free textbooks that meet scope and sequence requirements for most courses. They're peer-reviewed texts written by professional content developers. You can use one that's ready-made, or you can modify it. Speaking of being creative, we all know about TED Talks. I think we all love them, and how amazing they are. But do you know about TED Ed? So TED Ed originals are short, award-winning animated films about various topics. These original animated videos are paired with questions and resources, and they make up what are referred to as TED Ed lessons. If you want to make something more personalized to your learners, TED Ed also provides an international platform for teachers to create their own interactive lessons. You can create yours from scratch using a YouTube or a TED video, or you can adapt an interactive lesson that another educator has already created. So last week, I was in a real rush to prepare a homework assignment for my listening speaking class. So I found a pre-existing video lesson that was about 4 minutes long, and I adapted the multiple choice and short answer questions that had already been created by another teacher. It took me about 10 minutes to make a great assignment for my students. At the end, I had a personalized link, and I could log on and see which students had completed the assignment and how they did. And this is a picture from the page where you can do that sort of a thing. All free, of course. As you may remember, the MIT was an early player in the OER scene. So MIT's OpenCourseWare is a web-based publication of virtually all MIT course content. It does include EFL-specific resources, such as full courses, including a video lecture and materials. Some examples of courses they offer include listening, speaking, and pronunciation, also expository writing for EFL students, and advanced speaking and critical listening. All right, I'd like to hear from you guys a little bit. How many of you, shown by raising your hands, have ever participated in a MOOC? Raise your hand if you've participated in a massive open online course. Ooh, we have a lot of people. All right, very nice, very nice. Thank you. So related to MIT's OpenCourseWare are massive online open courses, also known as MOOCs. Many of the audience members here may remember this topic from Webinar 2.3, Tips and Tools for Strengthening Engagement in Online Learning. Just as a review, MOOCs are online courses that anyone can take for free. Because of the number of students, often thousands, you won't get personalized attention from the instructor, but you may get a community of learners who are generally willing to help each other. Although there are some classes geared just for EFL learners, MOOCs tend to attract teachers who want to improve their skills, as well as advanced English language students who are in fields such as STEM and want to take classes in those fields. So MOOCs are ideal for fostering content skills, for discipline-specific language skills, and for B2 plus learners on the CEFR level, so pretty much advanced learners. The MOOCs tend to have streaming videos as well, and so they're best suited for people who have high-speed internet connections. So let me give you some websites that offer MOOCs. They may be new for you, but they may not. Again, these resources will be available to you, so you don't have to write them down if you don't want to. So the Canvas network offers open online courses taught by educators from around the world. FutureLearn hosts a wide assortment of English classes that range from specific skills, such as university-level academic writing, to cultural classes. Coursera has begun specializing in content made for specific universities, but you can still find general education courses on this website. This site does feature English language courses ranging from general skills such as grammar and pronunciation to specific skills such as academic writing. And edX is a nonprofit originally founded by MIT, they come up a lot, and Harvard. It's an open source platform that partners with institutions, and they present higher ed classes on almost anything that you can imagine. And lastly, the Khan Academy is best known for popularizing the flipped classroom model, in which technical explanations are recorded and watched at the pace, place, and time that the student prefers, leaving class time for more interactive and collaborative pursuits. One criticism of MOOCs is that they lack the personal attention and relationships that help students stay in a course even when it gets tough. As a result, the completion rate for MOOCs is relatively low. To support students who are taking MOOCs, P2P University has created learning circles. They're peer-led study groups for people who want to take online courses together in person. So basically, they have a facilitator that doesn't have to be a content expert, and the site supports the facilitators with tools so that he or she can send emails, reminders, text messages, and collaborate with other facilitators around the globe. How motivated are you feeling? As you may know, a learning management system is also known as an LMS. It's very simply software that allows you to make an online class where teachers can have tests and activities and host their classes. I want to show you a few of my favorite places where you can do this, but first I have a question for you. Can you type the answer in your chat box and let me know? Those of you who have actually created a course online or contributed content to a course online, can you tell me which LMS or learning management system you used? Go ahead and type the name of the LMS in the chat box. I see Edmodo. Nice. Blackboard. Wiki Blackboard. All right, Moodle. Okay, so we have a good, nice. We have a really good range of what people have used. So a couple places where you can do this. I see a lot. Wow, a lot of you have done that. Nice. Canvas, something that we looked at before for offering MOOCs. You can also make your own class on Canvas. I love Canvas. I think it's one of the most elegant, robust, yet really easy to use LMSs that I've ever come across. There's a lot of free online training and a good community if you have questions. They offer a totally free account for teachers who want to teach a class online. Moodle is one of the largest, most established LMS platforms, 63,000 registered users, sites actually in 222 countries. So that's a lot of Moodle websites. Okay. The Sakai platform is another open source LMS. It features the same tools for online learning that the other ones do, chat functionality, a grade book, test creation, wikis. And lastly, Weebly for educators is a place where you can create classroom websites, student e-portfolios, and assign projects. It has drag and drop editing, so pretty easy to use. So now that I've shown you just a few of my favorite resources, I'm curious, do you have any idea? Let's look at a poll question. How many creative Commons licensed works are available in the world right now? So actually, in 2015, according to the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, how many Creative Commons licensed works were available? So your choices are 50 million, 400 million, or 1.8 billion. So that's a lot. And I see you guys are voting. Great. Okay, 16%, 12%. Good. Okay. Well, the answer is actually surprisingly 1.8 billion. That's a lot. That's a lot of stuff. And considering that if we go back to our presentation, I only showed you a tiny, tiny fraction of that. Really, what I have to do is I need to show you how to find some more. So there is a saying that if you give someone a fish, that person can eat for a day. But if you teach someone to fish, that person can eat for a lifetime. So in the spirit of teaching you to fish, I'd like to give you another tool to start with. This is the Creative Commons search tool, which is an online tool that allows you to search for music, for images, video, media, and the web in general for items that are licensed under the Creative Commons. Instead of being a website where the resources actually are stored, the CC search is a tool that will take you to other sites with OER items that you can use. As you can see from the image, you can enter a topic or keyword and then choose which site or media type you want to look for. So I love this. Let's talk about next steps. We'll finish up with a few things that you can do to support the OER movement. So many institutions that support education, from small schools to school districts to ministries of education to multinational aid groups, they produce and or fund the production of effective materials to enhance access in areas with few resources. If you have access to decision makers at one of these organizations, or maybe you are somebody who makes decisions, consider starting a movement to really persuade these organizations to openly license their materials that they're already creating so that we all can share in the wealth. Secondly, there are really a lot of OER, these resources out there created in the UK, in the US, China, and South Africa. But where there's really a need and an opening is for teachers like you in their own local communities to create work that is culturally and contextually relevant to their students. I know that you guys are already doing this. I would love to see you, and I would invite you to share it with us online. Use one of the platforms that I introduced you to, collaborate with your colleagues, and make something great. Then share it with us. I cannot wait to see what you create. So thank you so much. That is it for today. It's been a real pleasure presenting this webinar for you. I hope it's helped you to understand the role of OER in global education, and I hope that you will consider becoming part of this growing movement. I look forward to seeing your comments and conversations on the Ning.
Thank you so much, Melanie, for that wonderful presentation about open educational resources. I think we all have a lot more tools and tricks for finding great resources online that we can use and adapt for our learning contexts. So thank you so much, Melanie. And thank you, our wonderful audience participants today, for all your wonderful participation in the chat box and in the polls. And we very much hope to see you on the Ning in the discussion board. It's been wonderful to be with you during this second American English webinar series. And as we mentioned in the introduction, we will start our next webinar series on May 4th. Please register with your regional English language officer or local U.S. embassy to attend, and we hope to see you there.